Welcome to the UK Travel Planning Podcast. Your host is the founder of the UK Travel Planning website, Tracy Collins. In this podcast, Tracy shares destination guides, travel tips, and itinerary ideas, as well as interviews with a variety of guests who share their knowledge and experience of UK travel to help you plan your perfect UK vacation. Join us as we explore the UK from cosmopolitan cities to quaint villages, from historic castles to beautiful islands, and from the picturesque countryside to seaside towns.
Hi, and welcome to the UK Travel Planning Podcast. So this episode, Doug and myself are here to talk to you about how to make the most of the train journey between London and Edinburgh. We know that this is one of the most popular train journeys that you guys are going to possibly take, because in our itinerary consultations, it comes up more often than not, how to actually get from London to Edinburgh by train. So there are three different routes options that you've got. So Douglas here is going to talk through those different options with you.
So the options are really, you've got the East Coast Main Line, the West Coast Main Line, and the cross-country lines. So self-explanatory, the East Coast Main Line goes from London, King's Cross, or predominantly the east side of the UK, to Edinburgh. And then the West Coast Main Line comes back between Edinburgh, heads west, and it comes down the west side of the country to London, Euston. And the cross-country, surprisingly surprised, goes across the country from north to south. It's straightforward, really.
Yeah. So those are the main three routes. So if I was deciding to go from London to Edinburgh, I've got an option to choose any one of those routes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then, so if I'm going to go on choose one of those routes, what would be, if we went through each of those, where would be the places that you would recommend? Well, I kind of know as well, where we would stop off if we were recommending to somebody.
I think York's the biggie because there's something there for everybody, really. And that's from London King's Cross to York is about 2 hours-ish, and it breaks the journey up nicely. And so York has such a lot to offer, doesn't it?
Actually, I mean, you could do York on a day trip from London. I mean, that's something we've talked about before, but certainly if you're travelling up to Edinburgh, we do always recommend people to get off in York and explore because, there's so much to see in York. I mean, episode number 3 of the UK Travel Plan podcast, we talked to Sinead, who knows York so well and shared lots of insider knowledge about York.
Yeah, and I don't think we've ever actually been on the train headed through York. I think we've got off at just about every single time and had a good look around. I
think so. I mean, yeah, you can, even just if you've got a couple of hours, it's worth hopping off the train and exploring York. That's for sure. And, there is somewhere, if you are travelling with luggage, there is somewhere that you can leave your luggage.
That's right. There's left luggage at most of the principal train stations. Obviously, there's at King's Cross as well, if you didn't want to take everything with you.
Yeah.
There's left luggage in York and Edinburgh as well.
Yeah. I was thinking if you're travelling from London up to Edinburgh and you want to get off and you've got luggage, I know that might be thinking, I don't know, what do I do? But actually you can store the luggage, so you can then go and walk around. It's probably about a 5-minute walk, 10-minute walk from the train station into the centre of York. And obviously you've got places like the Shambles. You can go and visit York Minster. It is a really magical city to visit and very different from London. And I haven't yet to speak to anybody who does not love York.
That's true. There's something there for everybody. Yeah. Trust me, you won't be disappointed.
So you talked about these 3 routes. So is York a feature on each of those routes?
On 2 of the 3, actually. Yeah. The cross-country line from Edinburgh comes down as far as York, and then you can go for the East Coast Main Line from York. Basically, runs down all the way down to London via Peterborough, Newark, various other stations, but York is the main one that seems to appeal to most people. But worth noting, if you're coming from York and you're heading further up to Edinburgh, it's a good idea, particularly north of Newcastle, to sit on the right-hand side of the train. Yeah. Because that's the sea view, or the view of the North Sea. It's a good view.
It absolutely is. And I mean, that's a tip that we normally share in itinerary consults, actually, is that to sit on the right-hand side in the direction of travel, because you're going to see the stunning Northumberland Coast, which is the part of the UK that I actually come from originally, and the beaches and the castles, and it's absolutely beautiful. It really is. We did that trip this year when we were in the UK, and I took quite a lot of video when we travelled up there because it was so pretty.
Yeah, I mean, other places you can stop as well. North of York, you've got Durham and Newcastle, also places worth stopping off.
Yeah, definitely. So for both of those cities, really, the train station is a few minutes, 5-10 minutes walk from the main part of the city. So in Durham, you can get off, you can go and explore. Again, it's a cathedral city, really famous, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage site, the actual cathedral. So you can walk from the train station into Durham City. In Newcastle, you can hop off the train, and there's a few places that you can visit. You've got the quayside, which is kind of full of cafes and restaurants, and there's a life science centre also worth exploring. So all pretty close to the train station. Also, I just want to mention as well is if you're travelling up from that trip, bit of the train line from Durham up to Newcastle, is not to miss the Angel of the North. So Anthony Gormley's statue, which is huge. You can't really miss it from the train. That's also worth seeing. That's on the right-hand side of the train, again, in direction of travel. And you'll be able to see the Angel of the North. And also,
I need to point out that there's lots of brand new trains on this route. There's two main operators on that East Coast Main Line. There's a new Lumo service, which is standard class only or second class only, and the LNER, London North Eastern Railway services. All brand new trains, very nice, very smart.
So would you recommend anybody, so if they're planning to do that trip from London to Edinburgh, so they're obviously that they're planning to spend, maybe base themselves in Edinburgh for a few days travel around Scotland, and I know this is something we've done. So would you suggest then that East Coast Main Line would be the recommended route that you would choose to actually go up to Edinburgh?
I think so, particularly if you're a first-time traveller to the UK. I think it gets you to York and to Edinburgh as quick as you possibly can. It's the quickest services between the two capitals.
And again, so how long does it take to get? So if I left London, what sort of time how would I plan my day to actually get to visit, be able to sort of enjoy a bit of time in York and then also get to Edinburgh?
A good example of times from the current timetable. There's an 8 o'clock service from King's Cross, and then there's a direct service that is to York, arriving at 9:49. So that makes the journey up really nicely. And then you can have till 5 to 3. There's a service out from York to Edinburgh, and that takes another 2 to 2.5 hours. And so, it's sort of grand total travel is about 5 hours. So it breaks up really nice, particularly as children. It just breaks the journey up really, really nicely.
So that's a kind of recommended route. So you kind of imagine then we've got ourselves to Edinburgh. So arrive in a nice time, spend a few days in Edinburgh. Obviously, whether you take a road trip from there or travel a bit more of Scotland by train, which obviously we were talking a little bit about the other day, actually, because we're busy putting an article together at the moment about Scotland by train with different routes and scenic ideas and an itinerary as well. If you're thinking about visiting train, Scotland by train, we have got an itinerary by road, but we thought, because we've travelled a lot in Scotland by train, that we'd put that together. So obviously, so imagine that you're now in Edinburgh and then you want to get yourself back down to London. So you talked about the 3 different routes. So you're saying the best route to get up to Edinburgh is the East Coast Main Line, but you're also talking about kind of, if I had a bit more time, if I needed to get back quite quickly, would you again suggest going back on the East Coast Main Line or not?
No, time was of an essence to get back as quickly as you could, I think perfect option would be the Caledonian sleeper service, the Lowlander service, which actually comes back down the West Coast Main Line, ultimately bring you into London Euston. And that is obviously an overnight service, but that's quite an experience as well. They're lovely, the sleepers. We've travelled on them a few times, and it's luxury. It
is. I think in it's episode number 5 of the podcast, we do talk about the Caledonian sleeper, because that is it is one of our favourite train journeys to take from London. That to me, there's nothing better, taking the trip from London, Euston, and up to Fort William in particular, and the scenery is stunning. But obviously, we're talking about coming down the opposite way this time. So you're talking about, the Caledonian sleeper from Edinburgh to London is one option, if you want to do that as an overnight trip. So obviously you could come back the same route as you went up on the East Coast.
You certainly could, yeah. But an alternative, as I say, I like the circular train journeys, are a daytime travel on the West Coast Main Line, which brings you from Edinburgh. You can either go across to Glasgow if you want to do it that way, and then Glasgow down the West Coast Main Line from Glasgow Central. But there is a direct service also from Edinburgh. You've got the options. You've got Carlisle, you have Liverpool, you have Manchester. You also have Birmingham. All these lines verge onto the West Coast main line, brings you back into London Euston. On the opposite side, and it's only about 10-15 minutes walk between London Euston and King's Cross if you had left some luggage there to pick up as well. So it's not far between the two. So those options, it breaks the journey up down the West Coast, but all these different places. It's a beautiful journey when you head down through Cumbria and all the way down towards Birmingham. It's just different. It's different to the East Coast scenery. And then the third option would be, this is a longer journey. The West Coast main line in grand total takes about 5.5 to 6 hours, depending which services you catch.
So if you were going, if I was going East Coast main line, I would come from Edinburgh and arrive at King's Cross. But if I was doing the West Coast main line, I would leave Edinburgh and come into Euston.
That's right.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
You can come from Edinburgh, you can go to across to Glasgow and then down, or you can just cut it out and you come via Motherwell and that way.
Right,
all the way through. But it's just different. It's just a different route to take because, as you know, Tracy, I like train journeys where I don't have to come back the same direction. Just give you that different change of scenery. The other option I'm talking about, and this does take longer, is the cross-country line. You come from Edinburgh straight down the middle of the country, initially again to York. If you miss something on the way up, you can see stop off and on the way down. And then you can come down through Doncaster, Sheffield, and towards the city of Derby. And then you have the options from the sort of Sheffield Derby. You can come back to London St Pancras, which goes on the Midland Main Line route, and so you can go back onto that side of London again. Or you can head all the way down from York, all the way down to Birmingham New Street, and then you can join the West Coast Main Line from Birmingham New Street. Also, you can come from Birmingham, change stations, and you can go onto the Chiltern Railways, which is a slightly slower route, but different again, and that brings you into London Marylebone.
Okay, so you've got various options to get back into London if you're leaving from Edinburgh.
I should point out, before anybody I used to work with points out to me, Birmingham is not on the West Coast Main Line, but you can rejoin the West Coast Main Line at Rugby.
Right.
Because somebody would tell me I was wrong.
Okay, I see. So what about if you were, what would you recommend for tickets for this route, I guess, would be worth asking. I mean, we've done this various ways, and this year we caught the Lumo service.
Yeah, that's right, the standard class.
Yeah.
If you want a first class seat or experience, the Lumo is not going to provide you with that. It is more reasonably priced tickets, but it provides standard class only. But there were new trains, and
it was very comfortable.
Was really good. A seat service. You've got free Wi-Fi. It is, it's really nice. Really nice
I thought we were pretty impressed with that.
Yeah,
actually, it was good.
Yeah, and Lumo is just 1 year old, so that's how new the service is. Coming back through the cross country routes is Tracy mentioned she's from the northeast. I'm from the Midlands and more of industrial. So it's just such different scenery again, and Sheffield is a fantastic place to start. A lot of history, and to Derby, then back towards Birmingham. Different trains. It's completely different to the East or the West Coast Main Line.
Yeah, see, I mean, there's lots of options with this route, actually, this kind of London to Edinburgh and then back to London. So you have options, if you want to get up to Edinburgh fairly quickly, you have got the option of just hopping off in York, again, spending a few hours and then heading up to Edinburgh. So that works really well. But you have got those options to see other cities of the UK on your way back. That's
right, yeah. I mean, the network is very, very good and accessible from anywhere. Its time is up against a lot of time for people, isn't it, really?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But you mentioned tickets earlier. The ticket options we've documented many other times, but the ticket that gives you the most flexible option is the anytime ticket. Now, I do point out that is not the cheapest ticket. However, it gives you the more flexibility to catch any train on that day, and also any train at any time.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah. So it's worth considering that. And also, so you'll be able to basically get off the train at York and get back on the train at York.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So that for travel that day, I've just purchased that ticket turn up and go on any train that I want, jump off at York and then go back on the train and go back up to Edinburgh?
That's right, you can do that. And the only downside would be if you're the sort of person who likes having seats reserved in advance for every single train, and so you need to know what train you catch. And that's fine, if that's what suits you. What we do, we tend to sort of be a bit more flexible, don't we?
Yeah.
And try and find a seat wherever we possibly can on that service, because you don't have to have the seat reservation. For the vast majority of the services in the UK, it's only the sleepers really that you have to have.
And it is quite nice to have that flexibility if you wanted to spend, so maybe you plan to spend 4 hours in York, for example, but, you decided after 4 hours that you wanted to spend another hour there or something. Right. It gives you that flexibility, because you say there's plenty of trains to choose from.
Very frequent trains.
That gives you that flexibility to do that, so you're not kind of clock watching and thinking, oh gosh, I've got to get back to the train right this train station this second, otherwise I'm going to miss my train.
And we've done it the opposite way around because of weather as well. We've planned to spend sort of 4 or 5 hours somewhere, and the English weather has performed as we expected to do, and we spent an hour, 2 hours somewhere, and we've got back on the train to get out sooner, haven't we?
Yes, because it's
to head to a different part of the country where the sun might be shining.
Hopefully. Yeah. So I think that gives a pretty good overview of kind of those train routes. Definitely give us an idea of how to get around. So obviously there's the option as well of perhaps tickets in the form of a BritRail pass or a Global Eurail Pass. Those are something I know we've got an article on the website which looks at both of those options for people to decide especially if they're doing lots of train journeys in the UK. We do have quite a lot of information about travelling by train in the UK on the website, including we've got a 14-day Best of Britain rail itinerary, which this year we've actually had members of our UK travel planning Facebook group have actually done the itinerary this year and loved it and were raving about it. So obviously when you're doing lots of train journeys like that, those are a good option to explore. Yeah, and what it does as well, if you haven't got a specific individual train ticket, but you've got a train pass, that gives you that flexibility to the nth degree, because you can hop on and hop off any train you like. Yeah, depend on the BritRail Pass.
The validity days of the pass. Yeah.
So that's a good option. So are there any other kind of tips that you can think of for anybody planning that London to Edinburgh route? I mean, we tend to recommend, staying near the train station. But to be honest, really, in Edinburgh, you've got loads of options of places to stay that aren't too far from Waverley train station anyway. And obviously in London, if you're leaving from King's Cross, just got to bear in mind that if you're taking an early train, just make sure that you're at the train station in plenty of time.
That's right. And also what we recommend is to travel light as well.
Yes, if possible.
Yeah, because it does make life so much easier when you're walking around places.
Absolutely.
But as we alluded to earlier, there's left luggage at most of these stations.
Yes, if you need to leave your luggage. But obviously, plan your trip. If you're doing some train journeys, if you're doing this, this Edinburgh to London to Edinburgh in particular, make sure you're at the train station in plenty of time. Yeah,
and also I'll download the National Rail Inquiries app to your phone as well. That gives you live train details, and quite often on the National Rail Inquiries app, the platform that your train is likely, I would say always, is likely to depart from, which makes life a lot easier as well.
So I think that was great. I think we've given a really good kind of overview of and information about how to make the most of that trip if you're deciding to take the train from London to Edinburgh. As I say, there are places that we recommend that you consider stopping off on the way. York would probably be my number one choice, but obviously Durham and Newcastle also are easy stops. We have got more information about travel in the UK by train in actually podcast number 2. Doug gives an introduction to travelling in the UK by train with more tips to help you with that. And also we've got a recent episode about kind of travelling around London by public transport as well, which we'll link in the show notes to that. And we also have a ebook, which is a guide to UK train travel, which Doug and I wrote. So obviously Doug's background is that he worked on the UK rail network for over 25 years. So we spent a few weeks putting all our knowledge and information. We've just updated that into a book, which it's also got sample itineraries in it, but it shares lots of tips and information about the tickets, about the day of travel, what you need to know, how to get to basically trains, everything you need to know, really.
Yeah,
it's kind of everything. We've had lots of
like
fantastic travel in the UK by train. So as I say, I'll link to the show notes. I'll link in the show notes to everything that we talked about today and the articles that we have, and obviously our UK train travel guide. We are also available to do itinerary consultations as well if you need some help to fine tune your itinerary. As I say, we have a huge amount of background and knowledge about train travel as well. So Doug's always happy to talk about trains.
Always.
Yeah, so that's always a joy. So thanks very much for joining us for this episode. Please leave us a review and subscribe so you don't miss any more. And that all I guess that just leaves us for Doug and I to both say until next time, happy UK travel planning.